behind me. End stream.
Yeah, I can hear them.
I do believe we are live. Cool. So this week we have some interesting things that the world of telecoms has brought up for us. It seems like every week I read even the mobile live, not even just the mobile live feed, and there are so many interesting things to talk about. Yet we get to conferences and we just talk about the same old things and then answer the same old questions. So I've challenged, I don't know if we'll manage to get there yet, I've challenged a few people to ask us any of the questions that they would usually ask there that we can answer. But in the meantime, there are a few things that were in the news today, and in no other order. I mean, these are the ones that I was thinking, and I think you guys have put down. So one of them, Xiaomi, has had seen record sales. And I find Xiaomi quite interesting in that it links into some of our other comments. But there we've got the private 5G and a private 4G radio. And they are some of the easiest Androids to make work with standalone. For example, you can just go into the menu typically and enable standalone mode, which can be a pain in a lot of Androids. So that's quite, and they're actually quite nice phones. Yeah, they're quite, they feel like, I don't want to say they feel like an iPhone and sound like a fanboy, but there is a quality thing there that I can see will transcend. We had loads of comments on our Land Rover. I'm really sorry that you can see this. There's one of the Starlinks, two of the Starlinks there, which will be next. I promise next week we'll try and, I'll promise next week we'll try. I will promise next week we should, unless anything goes wrong, be broadcasting with, I'll use this phone or a 5G tablet and one of those Starlinks, if I can point in the right place, and that radio in the Land Rover that was commented on. And I think that was pretty amazing in that we covered a whole showground where the Wi-Fi had kilometers of fiber, dozens of access points, and still didn't cover properly. And we put up, we couldn't even put the mast up to the minimum height. We covered the whole place in line of sight with the maximum speed. And what else was there? Anyone else got anything else that we'll cover?
No, it'd be good to discuss that on the electric vehicle side. It was interesting on the on Xiaomi that they've increased their research and development costs with a number of projects. The only specific one they mention is the electric vehicle research. No details given, but clearly it's a hot topic or a very large bandwagon that's getting larger by the week.
Bandwagon.
Yeah, no pun intended.
It is interesting because apart from the AI washing and the eSIM washing of CES and Mobile World Congress, sorry to be slightly cynical, there are two things that I find very interesting with that. I don't know if you guys do as well, but and I've commented with some other people on LinkedIn to this effect, is that basically some of the most compelling vehicles and software-defined vehicles coming are offshoots of handset manufacturers. And bear in mind, companies like BYD, if you haven't seen those, have a look at this, unfortunately called a Seal, the vehicle, but it's basically like a Tesla Y that costs a lot less. Feels very good, doesn't feel budget, and has a fantastic, they just don't bother trying to put their own software in. And bless him, Elon Musk is a genius in so many ways. He's managed to get a rocket. I mean, every time you see a rocket of his go up in the air and then land, it's astonishing. But the Teslas are amazing. However, the one thing, the trap that he did fall into, the legacy trap, is this bloody software of the. I don't know how. Every time I get into a modern car, and I drive a 30-year-old Land Rover, and everyone goes, look at the sound system, it's awful. They're just dreadful. All of them, even doesn't matter who it is. The only people who have got something that I've seen impressive recently is Aston Martin, and they've got a massive Apple CarPlay. Or people like BYD who just put a 15-inch Android tablet like the Tesla tablet, but it's Android. and you can put what you like on it. So in short, sorry, I rambled on for a bit there, but the companies like BYD, their main business recently was making tablets, I think, for Apple, and phones for Apple, maybe. So there's a massive link between phone manufacturers and people assembling what is essentially a large piece of electronics versus a large industrial machine with ICE engines. I'm seeing, and I think one of the other things that I think is quite fantastic, I just have, I don't know if about you, but there's like 4 articles that I've read in my life that have really made me stop and think about the world. And one of them was about 20 years ago in the FT. It was naming how companies change, and for a company to survive, it needs to change, right? So GE was making light bulbs at the beginning of the century and was making jet engines by the time of that article. Nokia made tires and I think televisions, and then at that time was the leader in handsets, and nobody could believe that when Apple arrived, with their 2G handset with a glass front, and people were smirking, going, TV handset with a glass front. And I remember going to at least 2 years of the GSMA in when it was, I think it was the first times it was in Barcelona, and Google said, we're going to launch an OS for smartphones, and everybody just went, really? Do you know what's involved? And of course, a few years later, Apple, I have 10-year-old iPads, and the only thing that's wrong with them is that they don't have the processing power to keep up. But otherwise, they look, and obviously they look a bit dated, but physically they are still 100%. Whereas obviously you look at any other electronics like this, this GoPro still in theory works, but it's falling apart. So in short, sorry to ramble on, you caught me on something that we're starting making these small EVs, whatever small they are, but they already to me seem a lot better than anything else that we've seen out there for reasons that we'll be sharing soon.
Yep.
They are in a perfect position to take over the market, both from a software and a manufacturing point of view. And if I was, and I suppose the prices of the likes of the big EV companies and Apple versus the share price of car companies reflects that. I will shut up now. You got me all excited about this. It's just, Anyway, anything else that we want to cover in the next 23 minutes?
Well, while we're talking, I mean, obviously, EVs is very popular, but I'm just looking, and I apologise for not having full concentration. I cut a newspaper article out, and it was a Scottish MEP who'd racked up a £5,000 bill for using his tablet while he was roaming around at an EU conference or something like that. And I just thought I was just looking for it. It's quite relevant to what we're doing with eSIMs and things like that as well. Obviously to cut the costs of data whilst roaming. And there was a real live example. I think it said he was going to pay it back.
It's £11,000, isn't it? I think it was actually
it was a lot. It was a lot. I'm looking for the article. I can't find it.
It was 11 grand. It was his son on football, allegedly.
Yes, of course.
It's try and sport wash it.
No comment from here.
Yeah.
There you go.
But I think he has resigned, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Which is,
but obviously, cases like that are just very relevant to what we're doing with eSIMs, for travellers and things like that. Hugely relevant.
They are, yes, they are. It's I mean, I don't think people are quite seeing the fact that there are 1 billion smartphones. I'm not trying to get back to the other, but out there with SIMs in them, and I mean, they've got 11. What? Can't remember. I think it's an average of 11 slots, somewhere between 8 and 15 slots on the average SIM, all waiting for us. But and the world is more international than ever, isn't it? It's definitely going that way. And I think I despair with. Let's not get onto politics, but roaming is a problem that has happened. I had £7,000 of bill shock in the UK when I moved house, and a certain network operator in the UK changed my tariff, and they charged me £7,000 for my daughter watching Teletubbies in the kitchen where there was no Wi-Fi. And then I got a bill for about 3,000 and a bill for 1,000, and I got the 1,000 back because you could then Ofcom said you could reclaim your last bill, but not your previous ones. And but no one should really be losing their jobs for something that is, I think, basically, it's. I mean, the industry really needs to get a grip on this, because trying to charge somebody a very, I mean, you imagine if you're stuck in a restaurant and you have a bottle of wine or whatever, and they suddenly say, no, this, this bottle. Well, it's. I mean, if you look at I remember there was a Ryanair joke, wasn't there, from one of the comedians, where the Ryanair CNO goes into a pub and he asks for a pint, and they say that'll be £11,000 or something. He says, "Oh well, did you pre-order your pint, and did you check in when you came into the pub, etc." It is. I mean, it is bordering on deception, and even sounds ironic. It sounds perverse almost to be discussing, defending a politician against deception in this day and age. But for us mere mortals, it is ridiculous, the companies that we come across, even in the travel industry, who are banning their employees from using roaming.
There's a lack of knowledge as well by the consumer, and the industry does itself no favors, bar a few participants who make a business out of travel sims, as we do also. But they're not cover themselves in glory as an industry, because consumers generally don't care. It's one of a to-do list of when you're going away. It's probably very low down, below travel money and all the other stuff, and payment mechanics and inflatables for the kids and whatever else if it's a holiday. But the industry should be doing more. Part of the two sides. Christian, you're quite right in one sense that take the money and run from the industry and defend quite in my personal opinion, reprehensible behaviour. On the other side, on the positive side, to look, you can get this for probably cheaper than you can, or should be able to get this for cheaper than you can have your domestic tariff. That needs a lot of work and attention as well, is my view.
Yes, and let's move on anyway, because I think this one has been covered a few times. There was one I think you added, Carl, on the refurb phones, was it, and the cost of living?
Yeah, there was the refurbs. I'm picking up more and more, I guess, intel. You've got to be careful with this, that you, on your own personal experiences, hearing a lot more in the industry about this. But I guess the cost of living crisis is quite prevalent, and again, another major operator in Europe, in Belgium, has just announced a refurb program. It was quite big probably 20 years ago and tailed off, but now is but now seen a resurgent. But what's quite interesting, the marketing angles on them. One is sustainability and the green, and the second is the green angle. The sustainability being you reuse a product that you were going to throw away, and the green angle, obviously, and is probably on a similar theme. And the consumer, there's a cost benefit, etc. And you would think by now that the industry has got refurbs off to a T. It hasn't, and there are issues. So there's warranty issues that go with this, and of course, as we know, the mobile or the wireless industry is legendary for its customer service when something goes wrong. So there's that angle on it as well. But we've just seen a lot more being published on that, and that triggered me to think about that for this week, really.
Sadly, it's the right to repair bills that I think are forcing this, and rather than let people repair, it's like, let me repair this for you. And obviously what would be better is if people could repair their own things. I suppose this ties back into that. I'm not trying to tie everything back into the cars, but it does tie back into the cars, because one of the biggest problems people have with modern cars is how unrepairable they are. And we're almost going from the pan into the fire, aren't we, if we suddenly have the people who are ripped to shreds on iFixit making our cars instead of the people. That's I think one of the things that we need to start getting a grip on as well is actually and I saw this, I commented, I think you saw this, one of our suppliers of HSS's commented on the fact that everything they do is sustainable, and we've been using sustainable as much as we can, and obviously getting the power down as much as we can, along with partners, including that radio there, for a long time. But I think a lot of consumers would be quite surprised at how much it actually costs to use. So I think a lot of people will quite happily sit there and say, I've paid whatever for my 100 gig and I'm going to use my 100 gig rather than using Wi-Fi. But if they actually knew how much worse that was for the environment, for that to go over a mobile infrastructure off and back, and especially legacy mobile infrastructure, versus off to a 5-watt router and away, then they probably would have more questions than answers. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why governments like ours are investing in ORAN, because there is a massive difference in the power consumed between small cell networks versus centralized networks. And I think this is, the decentralization is key as well. So, and we're seeing this with EV, with solar as well. I don't know if I've got one of the solar panels from one of the tops of the cars over there, but I mean, that's generating, this idea, everything that we have from the grid is from the olden days when a house would consume 1 kilowatt. Well, houses now want 15 kilowatt. But we're decentralizing, and I think the same is happening with the networks, right? I mean, there's no point sending something all the way back to the center of England and back when most of the conversations are probably quite local. And
well, they are, and I think there's two things for me. One is the legacy issue you just alluded to. Most networks have still got so much tin in them because the cost of replacing them is so high. And what you replace it with? Well, you replace it with virtual or cloud-based systems that do the job for you. Well, you got a cloud-based system, you stick it in a green data center, for want of a better phrase. Well, great, that's all great, but what does that mean to an enterprise? They get it, but to a consumer, you're already going. You don't have the knowledge that the network is burning a lot of energy before you even get to sustainability. And then a green data center, what is that? Is that some, in my mind, is it somebody doing paying a carbon offset fee, or is it somebody planting a few trees to offset that footprint and calling it green? There's potential for greenwashing, and people become cynical. So I think the industry, again, is doing itself no favors by not explaining that.
Yeah.
And the networks don't want to, because that would cost them a lot of money to rip out a lot of legacy kit. I mean, we've seen the hoo-ha with the Chinese kit, and that's only being ripped out at the core. You've not got to the RAN yet. That's only future-proofed as replacement cycles come up.
Yeah. I guess it's just, as you quite rightly say, it's just they're going to make legacy products last longer and longer and longer. I mean, there was an article in the news only this week about BT. BT is supposed to be pushing everybody over, or BT or OpenReach, I think it is, or BT or EE, take your pick, pushing everybody to VoIP, over fiber and things like that. And of course, that program has now been delayed for at least another couple of years. So that's going backwards and backwards.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. I mean, this whole idea of net zero, we keep putting a date in the air, which feels like someone's put a date in the air, and they are achievable in many ways. I mean, so there's various things. There was an amazing article which I'll try and link to of EVs, and basically saying, by 2025, there's no incentive to buy anything other than an EV anymore. And even this was before seeing the price hikes of electricity, but even now, if you charge your car at home, the latest figures, which I can link to in one of in when we post this as well, show that if you charge your EV at home, it's still a lot cheaper than gas or petrol. But
I know
that we're doing it in such piecemeal bits, right? Because if we want to be green about phones, well, yes, I mean, the start will be using your existing device that's already been shipped to you for longer, and then being able to actually repair it. This idea that the right to repair will be countered by a sending it away, and it's admirable because you're not sending it all the way back to another part of the world, and the parts are not being shipped around. But it's still a second best, right? It's like recycling. The best thing is to not have so much plastic when you go to the supermarket in the first place, not have to recycle it all. And I think again, we just need to look at these things as a whole, because it sort of reminds me of, I remember when I was younger, and lots of people found the real cost of living when you leave university and you start getting a real job, and they're racking up bills with their credit cards, and what they do. It doesn't matter, I've cancelled my gym membership and I'm going to sort that. It's like, brilliant. So you've got a deficit of X £1,000 a month, and you've got rid of £40 a month, which means not only are you now going to be less healthy and miserable, but it doesn't solve your problem. And this is the thing, we're not doing this green thing as a whole and get the whole thing. And we see this in so many projects, right? Every problematic project we have had to go into in mobile is because somebody who did an MVNO project before, and they were just looking at the product part, or they're just looking at the business plan part, or they're just looking at the network part, thinks they can do the whole thing, and they're just looking and they're focusing on one part but not the whole picture. And guess what? It starts unraveling like an onion. And I just, whenever I see these net zero projects and what we're doing, and any of the, and I think just quickly on one of the points you said, I mean, when you look online, I mean, we've got sustainable hosting, but there's only probably, of the 20 people claiming to be green, most of them, they're just planting more trees, right? So it's like having a Range Rover and saying, I plant a tree every day for when I start it up. I mean, one of them dies when you start it up, but I'm still planting them. But we have to look at these things as a whole, and we're not. And one of the other things that we need to tackle, and I think this is one of the great things of the travel sim, etc., is we go off to America and we land, and it says for $5 a day you can use your existing bundle. And so brilliant, but actually what the travel sim teaches you is actually for those $5 you can have a gig. And you realize, actually, I can live for a whole week with that gig. And I can't consume a gig a day whilst I'm roaming anyway, because I'm in the hotel, I'm in the airport, etc. But we need to sort of rack back, and we've almost got this thing I see on the forums as well, people saying, I've got my EV and it's I recharge it with renewable. I can drive as much as I like now. No, you can't. You're still clogging the streets. You still, energy has to go from somewhere. It has to be distributed. The car has brakes. It uses tires. It's and calm. So yes, if you want to be green, I mean, obviously recycling and getting a renewed device is fantastic, and that is what I will be doing with my next tablet, because I've just seen I have tablets, and I think they've got a lot better, because when the first I think it's a bit like everything, right? I mean, everyone's been to the high street shop and got their screen changed for the phone and then gone, whoa, this only has like a tenth of the colors of what my original. So obviously if you've been refurbed like that, then that's a bad thing. But if you're if it's actually been refurbished properly, then great. But there's so many other things we need to look at, like really how many gigs do you really need, and start using those properly, and where is that going? And obviously I think it's fantastic, Wi-Fi uses so much less energy than circuit switched voice. It's astonishing.
Makes you wonder if phones and things like that, or cars, EVs, are going to go the same way as phones. Don't forget, most of us get rid of our phones and change them now because the battery's no good. It's not the processor, it's not the screen very often, it's the battery, and that's gone, and it can't be replaced.
That's the cheapest thing you can do. You can even go to an Apple store. I think it's £80, and they'll put a new battery in and recycle the old one, and you've almost got a new phone. I mean, this is
that's only if it's under a certain age. If it's over, say, 8 years old or something like that, they don't carry stock for it.
Well, yeah.
You got caught, Andy.
No, my wife did.
You took your newest phone in, did you?
I did, yes. 8 years old. Yeah.
This is my least vintage. This is the everyday drinking wine that I have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the unfortunately batteries are a consumable, and but they're not. I think one of the again, you just got to look at things like recycling a battery is not actually that. Well, let's leave that for another time. But the chemicals in there are not like some of the chemicals. I mean, I refuse to buy a lead acid battery even for my car now, because the recycling of those is just horrendous. They're full of acid and lead, and that's now when people can do it properly. You imagine all the legacy ones that will be burning people in another 20, 30 years as they crawl through a landfill. Oh, we have a comment which I did you do that, Carl? Or?
No.
Yeah, I accidentally clicked on
it. I apologies. I haven't all got to the grips of how we do that yet either, but we will do. It's just a question of time, really, isn't it? But
yeah, it is.
I think we'll be getting a bit more time back after we finally get some of these things out of here and out into the street. But
is it worth doing a couple of minutes on? I know we touched on the trial we ran last week in terms of the open RAN not spot using the Land Rover. Is it worth just touching on the cargo bikes and giving a timeline for when we expect we being able to show those and show some manufactured pictures of them and the theory behind them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can show you. It's like basically if you just imagine one of these on the top and two on the side, and then any cargo bike underneath. Can you see what it is yet? Is that what you meant? Probably not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, well, in my head, we've obviously got to produce one of these by the end of the month, which is coming rapidly with Easter in the way, and we should be able to be showing them, I guess, at some point during April. We're doing real life trials with a beta version that will be up and working.
Yes.
And there'll be for, I guess, some of the rural locations where we're going to be doing some trials over there.
Ironically, I mean, the biggest, yes, you are right, and I think it is worth spending them. And the biggest problem is obviously not producing them, is getting all the patents on the. So someone was asking me the other day, can you show us pictures of the back? No, not yet. So that should be solved pretty quickly. The production side is through so much planning is not the hardest thing, but I think it is important to touch on it, and it brings back to what we were saying, is that is a 100-watt panel, and with 3 of those on the cargo bike, we can run that radio plus a Starlink indefinitely in good sunlight, and the Land Rover has 400 to 800 watts on, and it can run it 24/7 indefinitely, because there's enough power in the batteries in pretty moderate sunlight. And even I was on one of the EV Cafe talks today about V2X. We can even start charging other. We can be charging other things in the. It's not massive V2X. It's not like your car running your aircon and your washing machine at home, but we can be charging people's laptops, people's phones, tills, barcode scanners, etc. So there is a bit of V2X in there as well, and even from the Wi-Fi, I don't know if this is what you were wanting me to say or not, but we will be. So I know you're dying to get these things out so we can show everybody. We will probably be getting the Land Rover out more sooner, because we can show that a bit more, and I can mask off the rear that before it's patented. But obviously, the e-cargo bike needs a little bit more work. But what I found absolutely shocking is that if you looked around, even each hut that was a point for the switch for the fiber was probably using more power than our entire, and that's each hut every few hundred meters in a kilometer was using more power than our radio that was covering everywhere. And it brings us back to, this time last year we were in Texas, in a factory where somebody had installed a private wireless that the factory couldn't. The factory, which had its own generators and produced its own fuel, proper industrial factory, had to sort of say, well, if everything goes down, we have to decide. Normally we have enough power for everything auxiliary whilst we bring it back up, but the private 5G that was installed by one of the big players consumed so much power that was a concern. And the short of it is, I think what we were suggesting was, consuming probably, there's a big number and a zero, possibly getting towards 2 zeros less. That's massive, right? That's
Yes.
consuming hundreds of watts versus kilowatts or tens of kilowatts is just, it's even before you get to the environment, it's just practical things like having enough fuel on site.
So we should be able to be showing these probably towards the end of next month. That's my expectation, unless you disagree.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I'm hoping before. We'll sort of have them enclosed in private spaces by the end of this month. Not all of the parts, because some of them have slightly longer lead times, but and I am hoping, on that note, that I was going to try and do it for today, and it would have been lovely with the sun to sort of sit there. The sun was still up for a little. We are in England. I know we're dressed like it's spring. Have you seen? We're suddenly I think on the last one even we're still sort of wrapped in blankets and bubble wrap.
It's tropical.
It is tropical. We are.
10 degrees.
As
still
Brits,
cold in the north.
We could be topless probably. If the internet will allow us to do that. But yes, we've ripped through another half an hour. Next week we will sort of open this up a bit, and we will promise to. Well, I'm hoping that I'm pretty sure we should be able to do. I'll at least do this from the 5G Land Rover over 5G, and I don't know where from, but we'll find somewhere with sun, hopefully. Or we'll just be chucking it down, and you'll hear hail bouncing off the roof of the Land Rover. And yes, we also have some other people coming on in the next few weeks to help us discuss the market trends. If you have anything you want to say, please do ask the questions, send the comments. We will discuss it, and we'll learn how to make this a bit more interactive. Well, we do know how to do it. It's just we daren't do it whilst online in case we mess it up. But with a bit of more practice, I think it's like everything, right? Just because you can launch something tomorrow doesn't mean that you do want to do that in front of the public until you've tested it a bit. And I think that's one of the things we've learned from 20 years of doing MVNOs and IoT is test and dry run before you make a mess of things. But we've ripped through another half an hour, and this is it until next week. Thanks chaps.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.